I didn't spend almost a decade building my reputation and saving every client on the brink of walking away, just to get replaced by someone who still used emojis in professional emails. But that's what it felt like the morning they introduced Mia, fresh-faced, 23, and all wide-eyed confidence, as the new director of client experience. My title, my accounts, my relationships, handed over like a party favor. 3 weeks earlier, I was still the one they called when deals were crumbling. I could take the most difficult clients, the ones known for screaming down the phone or ghosting follow-ups, and make them feel seen. I didn't use gimmicks. I listened, I followed up when no one else bothered, and I treated them like people, not line items on a spreadsheet. But apparently that made me a threat. Or at least it made Mark, my boss, uneasy enough to start rearranging things behind my back. He never liked how comfortable I'd gotten with the clients. Said it blurred lines. Said I made the team too dependent on one person. What he really meant was I made him look replaceable. Mark was the kind of guy who believed control was more important than competence, who saw every strong woman on the team as a threat to his authority, not an asset. And Mia? She was perfect for him. She nodded when he spoke, repeated his points like they were revelations, and never questioned why we were spending more time on optics than on outcomes. At first, I told myself it was just a restructuring, a new hire to help with overflow. But that illusion didn't last long. Meetings I'd always led were suddenly moved around without notice. Clients I had worked with for years started getting emails with her name copied instead of mine. One of them even messaged me asking if I was on vacation. When I checked the system, I saw that 2 of my biggest accounts had been quietly reassigned, without a conversation, without a reason. And then came the performance review. Mark sat across from me with a practiced smile and a printed chart showing slowed momentum in my portfolio. What he didn't mention was that the drop only appeared after they moved half my clients elsewhere. Pointed it out. He waved it off. "We're just looking at the bigger picture," he said, like that meant something. Like manipulating numbers wasn't personal. Like I was too emotional for even noticing. I walked out of that meeting trying to convince myself to stay calm, to wait it out. Maybe Mia would mess up. Maybe Mark would shift his attention elsewhere. But something inside me knew it wasn't going to go back to normal. They weren't just phasing me out. They were trying to erase me. Even then, I didn't give up. I still showed up early. Still responded to every email like my job depended on it, because it did. I even helped Mia when she asked, biting back my frustration every time she forgot basic information about a client I'd nurtured for years. I kept hoping that if I just stayed excellent, it would be enough. It wasn't. The email came on a Wednesday morning. Subject line: urgent check-in. No context. No warning. Just a time and a room number. When I walked in, Mark was already seated, flanked by 2 HR reps I barely knew. They didn't even offer me a seat before launching into it. "We're ending your employment. Effective immediately." I remember that exact phrase. No lead-in. No, "thank you for your contributions." Just a cold sentence delivered like they were reading it off a script. I asked for an explanation. They said there had been concerns raised about how I handled client relationships. Vague phrases. No evidence. No discussion. I asked for documentation. They said it was internal. I asked for a copy of the report. They said it wasn't subject to disclosure. They had nothing. They didn't need anything. The decision had already been made. I wasn't there to be heard. I was there to be dismissed. Mark didn't look at me once during that meeting. He just stared out the window like he was already thinking about lunch. The HR woman, her name might have been Julie or Jen, held a manila folder like it was toxic and said someone would pack up my desk. I didn't even get to say goodbye. I walked out of the building with my badge already deactivated, my email locked, my desk emptied by a stranger. By 2 p.m., Mia was on one of my top client calls using a script I had written. By 6 p.m., I got a message from an old client saying, "Heard you're under some kind of review? Hope you're okay." That was the moment the shock wore off and something colder settled in. Not sadness. Not even rage. Just clarity. This wasn't about performance. It wasn't about fit. It was about control. Mark saw me becoming too valuable, too self-sufficient, too respected, and he couldn't stand it. So he cut me off at the knees and made it look like I tripped. No severance. No warning. Just a whisper campaign and a fake report to keep his hands clean. I spent that first night staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow. Like the version of me I had built at that company had been erased overnight. And maybe that's exactly what they wanted. But they forgot something. I didn't get here by accident. I built that reputation from scratch. I turned impossible accounts into loyal partners. And most importantly, I kept records. All of them. The emails, the pitches, the project logs, the client messages that said, "Thank you for everything." I had it all. They wanted me to disappear quietly. But I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I kept opening old email threads, rereading praise from clients, going through documents I'd created from scratch, proposals, strategy outlines, onboarding systems. It wasn't about proving anything to myself. I knew what I'd done. I just needed to remember that it was real. That it happened. That I wasn't crazy. The next morning, I stared at a blank screen for an hour before typing a message to one of my longtime clients. Then deleted it. I knew better. Any move I made now could be twisted into a violation. I couldn't reach out. But if someone contacted me, that was different. At least that's what I hoped. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a company. All I had was a Gmail address I hadn't used in years and a resume that no longer made sense outside of the place that kicked me out. 2 days later, I got a short email. Subject line: coffee. It was from Nathan, the CEO of a software firm I'd supported through a brutal product launch the year before. The same guy who once called me during a blackout because his pitch deck crashed mid-demo. And he needed me to send him a backup from my phone. That guy. Reliable, jittery, loyal. I stared at the email like it was radioactive. Did this count as solicitation? Would they come after me? I didn't respond. Instead, I called a lawyer. I found her through a referral. Her name was Marla. She showed up to our first Zoom call in glasses too big for her face and an expression that said she'd seen this story before. I explained what happened, what I had and what I hadn't done. After reading through my termination documents and the company policies, she leaned back in her chair and said, "They messed up. No severance. No non-compete with teeth. They can't stop you from breathing. So if someone contacts me..." I began. "You can respond," she said. "You're allowed to work. They fired you with nothing to stand on. Let them try to scare you. Just don't make the first move." That night, I opened a blank Google Doc and titled it, Client Services Proposal V1. No logo. No branding. Just me, my name, and one sentence. Helping you keep the clients you can't afford to lose. I built a basic site using a free template. No flashy graphics. Just a landing page, a contact form, and a simple line. By referral only. Within 48 hours, 5 people reached out. Not through the site. Through my personal email. Through LinkedIn. Through old text threads. The first message came from Nathan again. Then Kara from the finance group. Then Rebecca, who used to run a small beauty startup and needed help relaunching a stalled campaign. All of them said the same thing in different words. "We didn't trust how they handled it. We trust you." I wasn't even trying to take clients. I didn't send a single pitch. But the news had spread fast. Everyone knew I was gone. And the way it was handled, quiet, shady, rushed, made people suspicious. Most of them didn't even ask what happened. They just said, "Let me know if you're available." So I said yes. Carefully. I drafted a 1-page contract with Marla's help. It said this wasn't a full-time commitment. No employment ties. Just professional consulting. Clean. Clear. And still I was terrified. Every invoice I sent made my stomach twist. Every email I wrote, I reread 5 times, terrified someone at my old company would accuse me of violating some clause I'd missed. I started keeping copies of everything. Folders labeled by client, call logs saved, timestamps on every draft. It wasn't paranoia. It was self-defense. Then the letter came. A thick, cream-colored envelope landed on my doorstep with the kind of embossed return address you only see on legal documents or wedding invitations. It was from their law firm. Not a surprise. Inside, a 4-page warning claiming I was engaging in unlawful solicitation and causing financial harm to the firm. At the bottom in bold, "Cease all business activity immediately or further legal action will be pursued." I sat there on my living room floor holding that letter like it might explode. For a moment I almost believed them. Maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe responding to those messages was a mistake. Maybe I should have disappeared like they wanted. I sent a photo of the letter to Marla. She called me 10 minutes later and said, "This is nonsense. Empty threats. Let them try." But fear doesn't always care about facts. That night I deleted 3 posts from my LinkedIn. I cleared my search history. I started whispering when I took client calls, even though no one could hear me through the walls. The fear stuck with me even when I knew I was in the right. And then came the leak. A screenshot popped up in an industry Slack channel I still monitored. It was a message I had sent months ago to a coworker, half joking, venting. "If Mark ever croaks, I'm taking half the client list and building a real business." Out of context, it looked bad. Like I'd been planning this all along. In context, it was nothing more than a tired joke at midnight after another 12-hour day. But the damage was done. A few people I hadn't heard from in weeks stopped replying to emails. One of my biggest clients canceled a follow-up meeting with no explanation. When I tried to reschedule, their assistant said they'd decided to pause consulting services for now. I knew what that meant. The rumors had started. Suddenly, I wasn't the wronged party. I was the ambitious schemer. The manipulative one. The one who set the house on fire and walked away with a smile. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. I stopped answering emails. I opened job boards. Scrolled through positions I'd never applied to: customer success manager, project coordinator, anything stable, anything quiet. I started filling out one of them. A remote position at a logistics firm. Decent benefits. Predictable hours. Then I saw the field that said, LinkedIn URL. And I froze. Because my name, the one I'd worked so hard to reclaim, was starting to mean something again. Despite the threats. Despite the gossip. Despite everything they tried to erase, I still had people who believed in me. I didn't submit the application. I closed the tab. I sat in silence. And then, almost like fate heard me hesitating, I got a call from Nadia. She ran a small financial firm I'd helped during a messy software transition last year. Tough, honest, and allergic to nonsense. "I got an internal memo from your old company," she said without even saying hello. "They told us you were under ethical review and that we should proceed with caution." My throat went dry. "I'm not under any review," I said. "There's nothing." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm calling. They're spreading it around. Quietly. But it's moving fast." She paused. "You want a copy of it?" When I saw the forwarded email later that night, I almost couldn't breathe. There it was. On company letterhead. Sent out right after I was fired. A blanket warning, full of vague phrases and passive-aggressive language, meant to discredit me without ever naming me directly. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were trying to poison the well. I forwarded the document to Marla. She responded with one sentence. "We're filing." I don't think I moved for 20 minutes after reading that email. Just sat there on the couch, screen glowing in the dark, that PDF open like a wound I couldn't close. It didn't even say my name. That's what made it worse. It danced around the truth like a lawyer carefully avoiding defamation, while still smearing your name just enough to make people hesitate. It said things like possible misconduct, and advised caution when engaging with recently separated personnel. No facts. No findings. Just enough smoke to make people think there had been a fire. I forwarded it to Marla without saying anything else. 10 minutes later she called me. "This isn't just underhanded," she said. "This is defamatory. It's also interference. If they're actively trying to get clients to stop working with you, they've crossed the line." Then she said something I hadn't thought about before. "We're not just going to respond. We're going to file back." That same night, while I was still processing the memo, another text came in. This time from Ben, a senior client I used to work with from a big construction firm. We'd helped restructure their communication strategy during the pandemic. He was old school. Email only. No emojis. Always paid early. His message just said, "Can we meet in person? I have something to give you." I assumed he wanted to end the contract face to face. That maybe he was one of the ones who believed the rumors. But when I walked into the little cafe he picked downtown, he didn't look angry. He looked serious. He slid a flash drive across the table like he was passing state secrets. "I shouldn't have this," he said. But I got copied on something by mistake. A thread between your old boss and the HR team. Thought you'd want it. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even open it right away. I just took it, thanked him, and left before anyone else could see us. Back in my apartment, I plugged it in. Dozens of emails. Strategy notes. Meeting recaps. Subject lines like transitioning high-profile accounts from current rep, and succession planning if client attention shifts. Some dated months before they fired me. Some written by Mark himself. One email hit me like a punch. She's talented but difficult to scale. Can't build a brand around someone we don't control. Another from Dana, Rachel's manager, read, she's too connected to the clients. Makes the company look like it relies on her too much. It's a risk. They've been planning it all. Quietly building a case to remove me. Not because I failed, but because I didn't need them. I didn't sleep that night. But I didn't cry either. I didn't break down. I just sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began to organize everything. Emails, timelines, call logs, screenshots of Slack threads. I built folders, labeled everything, cross-referenced every date. My entire professional history preserved. I wasn't even thinking about revenge. It didn't feel like that. It felt like preparation. Marla filed the paperwork that Friday. One suit for defamation, one for interference, one for unpaid commissions tied to clients they'd transferred without proper adjustment. We didn't go public. We didn't announce anything. Just served the papers and waited. Their response came fast. Legal threats. Denials. The usual posturing. Their lawyer used phrases like baseless claims and frivolous litigation. But I could tell from the tone, they weren't as calm as they sounded. Then came the silence. Some clients paused. Others ghosted entirely. Even a few people I thought were loyal stopped answering my emails. They weren't against me, not really. They were just scared. Scared of being seen backing the person in a lawsuit. I started questioning everything. Every new client inquiry felt like a trap. Every calendar alert felt like it could be a setup. I'd refresh my inbox obsessively, then close the laptop and walk away, only to come back 5 minutes later and check again. I tried to keep going, tried to focus on work. But some days I'd sit in front of my screen for an hour without typing a word. The fear made me second-guess every decision. The weight of it was constant. Quiet but heavy. I even started looking at jobs again. Just out of curiosity, I told myself. Something easier. Something less exposed. But then something happened that shifted it all again. Nadia. She was one of my toughest clients back when I worked at the firm. High standards, sharp tongue, allergic to excuses. She called me one morning out of the blue. You didn't tell me they said you lost your license. She snapped. I blinked. I don't have a license. I'm not a lawyer. I never needed one. Exactly, she said. Which makes it strange that their internal memo claims otherwise. Said you were under review by a professional board and should be avoided. My stomach dropped. She emailed me the file. There it was. Another memo, this time sent to legal departments of major clients, warning them that I was allegedly facing some kind of regulatory investigation. Complete fiction. And now it wasn't just hurting me. It was damaging my reputation with potential clients, with people who trusted me. When I sent it to Marla, she didn't even hesitate. We're updating the suit, she said. This isn't just slander. This is strategic destruction. They've crossed every line. But the hits kept coming. Another client bailed. A contract that had been ready to sign went cold without explanation. I saw posts on LinkedIn, people speculating about toxic consultants and burned bridges. None of it named me, but I recognized the language. I could feel the intent behind it. I tried to keep my head down. I focused on the work I still had. But every quiet moment felt like a countdown. Every delay felt like a punishment. I stopped sleeping again. Stopped going outside. I kept my phone on loud all night, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started thinking maybe they were right. Maybe I should have just walked away. Maybe I'd overreached. I kept whispering apologies to no one, saying sorry in my head for things I didn't even do. Then I got the call from Phil. He was retired now. Used to be the head of operations at a logistics company I'd helped restructure. Kind, old-fashioned, and blunt in a way that always felt safe. I heard about the lawsuit, he said. Just wanted you to know. I'm in. I was quiet. Phil, you're retired. You don't have to get involved. He chuckled. That's exactly why I can. I watched what they did. I watched them shut you out. I still have the memos. I still have the emails. You were the only reason we stayed afloat back then. I owe you the truth. Then he said something I didn't expect. And just so you know, I was one of your first investors. Quietly. Through a holding name. Been following your work since day one. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, not saying a word. I didn't have to. Phil believed me. Not because I begged. Not because I asked. Because he saw it. He watched it happen. And somehow in that moment the fear didn't vanish, but it got quieter. Like it knew it had lost something important. I opened my laptop again. Not to check emails. Not to track invoices. But to prepare. If they wanted to make this a fight, I was ready now. Not just to defend myself, but to finally tell the whole truth in the only place that mattered. Court. I didn't expect the courtroom to feel like that. No drama. No gasps. Just buzzing lights, dry air, and furniture that looked like it had been ordered in bulk sometime around 1998. The judge didn't wear a scowl or look particularly impressed with either side. He had a tired face and a half-read newspaper tucked inside a golf magazine on his desk. But that didn't bother me. Because for the first time in months I wasn't walking in afraid. Marla was calm. Confident but quiet. She didn't talk to fill silence. She organized her notes like someone setting up chess pieces. And when the other side finally walked in, it was Mark leading the charge, right on cue, with that smug calm he wore like a tailored jacket. Same expensive tie. Same perfectly rehearsed expression that said he still believed the room belonged to him. He barely looked at me. Their lawyer opened with a performance. That's what it was. A speech dressed in legal language. He used words like disloyal, opportunistic, destabilizing. Said I had manipulated client relationships for my own gain. Said I'd taken advantage of my access and tried to build a company off theirs. I didn't interrupt. I just sat there still and steady. Not because I wasn't angry, but because I didn't have to perform anything. I had proof. When it was our turn, Marla didn't raise her voice or pace around like they do in movies. She simply walked the judge through everything. Step by step. Email by email. A clean timeline of my removal, the slander, the blocked commissions, and the smear campaign that followed. She didn't say I was a victim. She said I was prepared. I watched the judge shift in his seat when she showed the internal memo calling me a risk. He flipped through our exhibits slower after that. Took more notes. Stopped checking the clock. Mark's team tried to push back. Brought in Rachel to testify. She smiled a lot. Said I had created tension in the office, that my independence made others uncomfortable. Said she'd personally heard clients express concern about my tone. Marla pulled up their Slack threads. The ones where Rachel complimented my work. Praised me for saving accounts. Sent me celebratory emojis after every big deal. The silence that followed those messages being read aloud was satisfying. Then they called Mia. Poor Mia. She looked nervous from the moment she sat down. Tried to smile. Fumbled her notes. Said I hadn't been collaborative. Said I didn't include her in meetings. How long had you been employed before the plaintiff was terminated? Marla asked gently. 6 days, she answered. Did you attend any of the plaintiff's meetings or manage any of her accounts during that time? No. Did you ever speak to her clients before she left? No. Marla nodded. Thank you. That's all. The judge didn't look at Mia. He looked at Mark. For the first time really looked. Mark shifted in his seat. Adjusted his tie. Said nothing. But it wasn't over. Because then Phil walked in. He wasn't even on the witness list. But when we learned we could call additional witnesses if they were present, Marla turned to me and asked if I wanted to include him. I nodded. He stepped up like he'd been waiting for this. I worked with her for 4 years, he said. I saw how she carried this company through chaos. I also saw what happened when she started being excluded. When decisions were made behind her back. I know what I saw, and it wasn't misconduct. It was fear. From people who couldn't match her results. The courtroom was quiet. Not frozen. Just listening. The judge closed the folder after Phil stepped down. said he would take a few days to review everything, that the decision would be shared with both sides soon. I wasn't disappointed. I knew the process, knew how it worked, but walking out of that room felt different than I thought it would. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that comes after standing up for yourself for so long that sitting down no longer feels like defeat. I spent the next few days back in my tiny office corner, answering emails, holding on to the clients I still had, moving forward even when my stomach still twisted at every new message. Then one morning the decision came. The court found no breach of contract, no wrongdoing, and it ruled in favor of my countersuit. Mark was ordered to pay all unpaid commissions and damages for defamation. His firm's legal posturing had not only failed, it had cost them publicly. I read the judgment 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to feel what winning felt like. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with cheers or clapping. It came with silence and peace. Word spread fast after that. A few clients I hadn't heard from in weeks reached out. Quiet messages. Congrats. You were right. Want to grab lunch? Some meant it. Some just wanted to be on the right side again. I didn't respond to all of them. I didn't need to, because the people who really mattered, the ones who stayed when the storm came, were still with me. Nadia sent me a notebook with my initials printed on the front. For your real firm, she wrote. It's time. Phil emailed me a link to a shared workspace downtown. Said he'd covered the deposit. Even Ben, who handed me the flash drive, dropped off a gift basket with a card that just said, "Truth wins." I didn't celebrate that night. I didn't throw a party. I just sat on my balcony, laptop closed, coffee in hand, watching the world carry on below like it didn't know anything had changed. But I knew. I wasn't just free. I was mine again. Mark would go on, probably rebrand the loss as a lesson. He'd talk about company values in future webinars, sprinkle words like growth and resilience into a story that left out what really happened. That's fine, because the people who built their success on other people's silence always find a way to spin it. But this time someone spoke up. And when the silence broke, so did their power. I still don't know what comes next. Still have mornings where I doubt myself. Still catch myself checking the mirror for signs of stress I didn't see coming. But I'm not afraid anymore. 'Cause I didn't just survive. I stayed standing. And now every time someone hears my name, they remember who I am. Not because I shouted, not because I begged, but because I told the truth and refused to disappear. And that's the kind of power they can't take back.